This is Mac OS Ken.
Apple's looking to bust its union-busting judgment. Talk of Apple Pay in India. And Oscars get tougher for streaming services. It is Monday, the 26th of June, 2023. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from Mac OS Ken. Brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by BetterHelp. Online therapy. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/macOSKen. This show is also sponsored by Issue, the all-in-one platform to create and distribute beautiful digital content. If you're already producing newsletters, magazines, catalogs, and stuff like that, but feel like you could use a little something, Issue can help. Issue lets you turn your flat PDFs into interactive digital publications and social posts for everyone and across a number of platforms. Embed the content on your site. Turn it into easy-to-read articles for mobile. Send it out to your mailing list or reach your audience on the socials. With Issue, you can create once and share everywhere. Issue helps you hit the platforms you know with the tools you know as well, folding seamlessly into the stuff you're already using like Dropbox, InDesign, MailChimp, and more. Get started with Issue today for free, or sign up for an annual premium account and get 50% off when you go to issue.com/podcast and use promo code MacOSKen. That's ISSUU.com/podcast and use promo code MacOSKen at checkout for your free starter account or 50% off an annual premium account. That's issue.com/podcast with promo code MacOSKen. Midweek last week, a judge with the National Labor Relations Board deemed Apple guilty of union busting. This was tied to charges leveled against the Cupertino company around its dealings with employees at Apple's World Trade Center store in NYC. According to a couple of pieces on the ruling, the judge indicated that Apple was guilty of coercively interrogating workers about their feelings on unionization, that it was taking pro-union literature out of the break room, and that it needed to knock it off. Or, more formally, Apple should be required to cease and desist from interfering with, restraining, or coercing employees around protected labor activism. Now Apple says, nuh-uh. Or, more formally, 9to5Mac says Apple plans to appeal the NLRB ruling. In its response, the piece has Apple saying it disagrees with the complaints and says that open, honest, and direct communication is part of the company's collaborative culture. And thus begins what could be a long and tortured dance. In writing up last week's ruling, a piece from Bloomberg said rulings by NLRB administrative law judges can be appealed to the board's members in Washington and, from there, to federal appeals court. Well, they can't all be Apple Vision Pro stories, now can they? There was a story everywhere over the weekend that feels both important and not. TechCrunch says Apple is talking with authorities in India about getting Apple Pay up and running for the subcontinent. Well, sure they are, right? Population 1.3 billion, growing presence in India for Apple, growing adoption of Apple Gear for India. The news seems to be that the company will soon have a nuts and bolts conversation on implementation, like how Apple Pay can run on a backbone specific to the country. Sort of downplaying the news that TechCrunch itself was bringing, TechCrunch says India is a tiny market for Apple and a possible launch of Apple Pay is unlikely to disrupt incumbents in the ecosystem, which processes more than 8 billion transactions a month on the nation's mobile payment backbone. More than 90% of all smartphones in use in India run Android, according to TechCrunch. Okay, but a piece of $8 billion a month is better than nothing. Plus, population 1.3 billion, growing presence in India for Apple, blah, 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 blah. It's practically bound to happen at some point. Apple Insider says the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences is trying to squeeze films from Apple TV Plus out of the Oscars. It feels like it's a bigger threat to Hulu or Amazon or anybody but Apple, really, but stick with me. According to the report, the Academy is changing the rules around what films would be eligible for an Oscar, starting with films released in 2024, so films that might be up for Academy Awards in 2025 and beyond. Movies have to have a wider release than was ever required before. Currently, the piece says, a qualifying run is for a one-week theatrical release in one of 6 U.S. cities. Starting in 2024, that 6-city rule is still in place, but it has to be followed by an expanded theatrical run of 7 days in 10 of the top 50 U.S. markets, no later than 45 days after the initial release. There's a bit more, but that's the gist. You can't run a film in New York or LA for 1 week, then throw it onto your streaming service and still go home with an Oscar. In a statement on the changes, Academy CEO Bill Kramer and Academy President Janet Yang are quoted as saying, "As we do every year, we have been reviewing and assessing our theatrical eligibility requirements for the Oscars in support of our mission to celebrate and honor the arts and sciences of movie making. It is our hope that this expanded theatrical footprint will increase the visibility of films worldwide and encourage audiences to experience our art form in a theatrical setting." As a big fan of movies on the big screen, here's a bit of free advice for the Academy. You want people to go to the movie theaters? Try making them suck less. Or cost less. Ideally both, but start with making the experience better. Back to the rules change. There was one weird thing about them. They're only for Best Picture. Apple Insider says eligibility for individual disciplines remains unchanged. So you could, in theory, have the Best Actor, Actress, and Director statues go to people in a movie that cannot win Best Picture. This crazy business we call show, huh? As for why this is not likely to be as big a deal for Apple as it is for Hulu or Netflix or whomever, Apple is blazing a path to the cinema. The Cupertino streamer already has 3 films planned for wide release between now and early 2024. Those include Killers of the Flower Moon and Napoleon later this year, and Argyle early next year. Assuming that's the way things go going forward, Apple movies that actually have a shot at Best Picture should be set in terms of eligibility. More news in a moment, but first a word from today's sponsor, BetterHelp. Online therapy. We should have a national conversation about mental health. We should all be looking out for the mental health of others, and everybody should be looking out for ours. It's not the planet we ended up on, though. The planet where we've landed is one that stigmatizes therapy, one that says worrying about such things is weak. It takes strength to seek help, to ask for help. When you're ready, there's BetterHelp. I worked with my last BetterHelp therapist on anger over one particular issue. I have a family member with relationship issues who is currently working with BetterHelp. Since the whole thing happens online, they didn't have to worry about finding and going to a therapist. Just fill out a questionnaire and BetterHelp will work to find a licensed therapist who's right for you. And if they end up not being a great match, you can switch therapists anytime at no additional charge. Maybe you're doing great, and that's great. If there is anything holding you back or getting you down, you can get through it. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/macOSKen today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/macOSKen. BetterHelp.com/macOSKen. If you have got an LG Smart TV, you can have a couple of months of MLS Season Pass on somebody. iLounge says the electronics maker has announced a promotion which will let LG Smart TV owners grab 2 months of soccer at no cost, provided they sign up the LG way. That would either be through the LG Content Store or by clicking on the banner advertising MLS Season Pass on your LG TV's home menu. The offer is good for new and returning customers. It's also applicable to LG Smart TVs made as far back as 2016. Folks who want to grab it need to do so before the 26th of July. Though iLounge does not say so, the subscription likely rolls over to monthly billing after the 2 free months, so be on the lookout for that. Funny, not funny news out of the Bonnaroo Music Festival. A piece from 9 to 5 Max says police in the festival's host area of Manchester, Tennessee, dealt with 5 times as many accidental emergency calls this year versus previous years, thanks to crash detection. That's new since the last Bonnaroo. The feature went live in late 2022 with the releases of iPhone 14, Apple Watch Series 8, Apple Watch SE, and Apple Watch Ultra. In other news, people are buying lots of Apple stuff, it seems. It's probably the wrong message. According to Wikipedia, Manchester has a population of roughly 12,000 people, or did in 2020. Bonnaroo attracts about 80,000 people. That's going to put a strain on law enforcement without a lot of false emergency calls. More calls equals more strain. That's the not funny part, but we can laugh about it now. While officers had to track down every call to make sure that every caller was okay, Manchester police say they didn't have any situation where they couldn't help someone due to the amount of calls. And finally today, good news for you folks in the Tar Heel state. Apple Insider says plans are underway to replace the store that closed earlier this year in Charlotte, North Carolina. Seems there was a bit too much gunplay for Apple's liking in and around North Lake Mall, home to the shuttered Charlotte location. In early March, that store was closed, suddenly, unexpectedly, and permanently. Back then, a piece from Bloomberg said shots were fired outside of a Macy's at North Lake Mall the day before the store closed, while another shooting took place in early February. There were additional shootings reported in December of 2022 and in 2021. Not a rash decision on Apple's part, but one that was seriously surprising at the time. The store actually opened for business that morning, then closed for good halfway through the day. What's passed is prologue to a new store, it seems. Apple Insider says permits have been filed for construction at 8805 Townley Road in Birkdale Village, an outdoor shopping development about 9 miles from North Lake Mall. The piece says the new store will open as part of a larger effort to rejuvenate the area with new properties including Anthropology, Lilly Pulitzer, Cheesecake Factory, and other new retail venues opening. No word in the piece on when the store will open, though if Apple's just getting permits now, it's probably going to be a minute or two. The report says when the North Lake location closed, a message on Apple's website said that a new store would open in Charlotte in early 2024. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and sponsored by Issue. Get 50% off an annual premium account with code macOS Ken at issue.com/podcast. This show is also sponsored by BetterHelp. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/macOSKen. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media. Online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. Info at macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.